like to live by the notion that anyone can change and that people should be given the opportunity to do so. Obviously, things can't always be so cut and dry. I'm not going to tell a victim that they need to give the person who hurt them the opportunity to prove that they've changed. No one is obligated to stick around during the bettering process, especially if they've been victimized by that individual or others in the past, and it's selfish to expect that of them. I simply like to cater to the idea that if people can choose to be bad or do things that hurt others, then they can also choose to better themselves and the world around them through personal improvement. All I ever want from people is for them to strive for self-improvement so that they make the rest of the world and the lives of those around them better by proxy. How that self-betterment journey plays out is going to be entirely dependent on the individual, their ability to recognize their own faults, their willingness to grow from them, and any support system that they may have to lean on, but I like to give people the benefit of the doubt in presuming that it can happen, even if you're not around to see it happening. In that regard, it also sort of depends on what they personally feel would serve as a betterment of society. You know, one person's evil is another person's religious crusade or something. You can have people who legitimately think that they're doing a good service, only for them to do way more harm in the long run than good because they are overall ignorant to the wider results of their choices. It would be nice to be able to believe that people are inherently good and that they can be even more so. Now, this hasn't always worked out for me. In fact, it feels like more and more every time I try to give a person the benefit of the doubt in believing that they can improve and address their toxic habits, they turn around and bite me. And I am so very, very tired of being bitten. You know, in general, it's just maybe a good thing to assume that people can change for the better. But then I see a case where it looks like someone is taking the steps to accept some of the criticism that's been previously levied against them to better what was seen as a negative aspect of their behavior, and they still get flack for it. I came across what looks to be one of those cases today. Let's talk about it. Oh, and before we continue, just because I know some of you guys listen passively to my content and I don't want you getting spooked by the time we get into the meat of things, trigger warning, we're going to be partially talking about eating habits, weight issues, and diet culture. The main meat of the video is about something else, but all of these things are inherently important context. So if you're sensitive to those topics, please be aware and take care of yourselves. So hi-ho, hello! What's the dealio? Have you ever heard of Tess Holiday? If you haven't, that's fair. I only really know about her because a couple of the YouTubers I sometimes watch talk about her on occasion. I don't think I've ever actually seen any Tess Holiday content just freely floating out in the internet ocean. Tess is a social media influencer, a makeup artist, and plus-size model based out of Los Angeles. What is a plus-size model, some of you may be asking? Well, it's sort of exactly what's advertised on the tin. Someone who models clothes for those who have a higher body mass index than the average. Not everybody can look like a Victoria's Secret runway model, and it makes sense to advertise based around the wide variety of body types that can exist in the world. You know, for as much unjustified hatred as he got for it, Joe Cat wasn't wrong about the variety of body types that can be beautiful to a person.
I like the belly folds, I like the six-packs, really tall queens, and the short stacks.
And all of those different body types need clothing options to help accent and advertise their own personal vibes. However, Tess Holiday in particular has garnered a lot of scrutiny based on her health at any size model that is included as a part of the fat acceptance movement. If you don't know what that is, the fat acceptance movement is a means of combating the social stigma surrounding obesity, detailing that the reasons for why a person is fat isn't really anyone else's business, that people sort of just need to accept that individuals with much higher BMIs exist, and that they're not going anywhere. You may have also heard it under other titles like fat pride, fat activism, or fat empowerment. On top of general social acceptance and change, they seek to reframe and draw attention to how overweight individuals are treated legally, by the medical field, as well as the kind of hardships that they face on a daily basis, which, of course, can include a lack of affordable or appealing clothing options. Also because, you know, she's kind of famous and has been interviewed talking about this sort of thing. Longer reach and all that. It's not exactly much of a stretch to understand why a plus-size model would be a proponent for fat acceptance. That's like being shocked that a comic book artist might be concerned with maintaining artistic copyright. It's sort of a factor of their job at that point. Acting as something of an opponent to this side, there are those who criticize the fat acceptance movement. Their argument is that people should not be promoting an unhealthy lifestyle, especially through the phrase health at any size, because it's not necessarily true. They argue that this kind of promotion is dangerous because it dissuades people from seeking to better their health through weight loss and exercise, and in some cases, teaches that weight loss shouldn't even be considered as a factor when making medical decisions. Some of you might think that a little silly, but there are people out there who expressly forbid their doctors from suggesting weight loss as a valid means of bettering their physical health and won't hear anything about their weight being the cause of some medical issues. There are objective problems that arise from being too overweight, just as there are objective problems with being underweight. It's almost like the issues are within those extremes. Much like how the poison is in the dosage, too little or too much is too extreme of an option, and that's how you get hurt. Equally, everybody's median is going to be slightly different because every person's body is slightly different. Someone who's 5 feet tall and 100 pounds could be perfectly healthy, but a person who's 6 feet tall and 100 pounds absolutely needs to see a doctor. You can also have people of the same height but with different builds, meaning that their muscle and fatty tissue is going to collect and sit on their bodies differently from one another. Granted, this isn't the only counter that these critics present. Some of them like to argue from the stance of how someone's weight can affect those around them. Things like intruding on another individual's personal space in cramped places like flights, rising universal healthcare-based taxes to accommodate an increasingly unhealthy population, how their bad habits might be passed down to their kids or those under their care, their inability to cater to the needs of their pets, or even bringing up how their loved ones are going to feel should they pass at a young age. It's probably worth noting, however, that plus-sized individuals are not the only people who could potentially pass down bad habits to their children. Smokers seem like the obvious counter to that, something that I never hear get brought up in these conversations, but you know, in fairness, this is sort of outside of my purview. But on top of that, people with dietary obsessions can pass that along to their kids. We hear about this happening all the time with pageant moms or mothers with kids who are cheerleaders or dancers, where the mother's obsession with weight loss on the part of their child results in that same child developing an unhealthy relationship with food. While I can see where they're coming from in some of these regards, I also see the issues with them, as a lot of these arguments are built upon the notion that those being criticized are in the state that they are by virtue of actively choosing to forego healthy dietary choices, which is not always the case. Granted, sure, if you're talking about Nikocado avocado, you've probably got a point. People can gain weight because of diabetes, PCOS, kidney problems, hyper and hypothyroidism, certain forms of cancer, depression, insomnia, menopause, and many other medical conditions. Prolonged psychological abuse can bring about weight issues. Some people can also have a genetic predisposition to obesity that they might struggle with. There are even some ethnic groups that are more susceptible to it than others, so when they are exposed to, in particular, an overly fatty and sodium-rich Western diet, it wreaks havoc on their BMI. Unfortunately, these types of processed foods are sometimes also more affordable than the healthier alternatives, so financial stability or income can also play a huge factor. It's very easy to assume that a person's struggles with their weight are their own fault, especially when you aren't aware of their medical history. Oftentimes, someone withholding the medical reason for their weight could be seen as them making up excuses for their own bad habits, even though you are not entitled to know about their medical diagnosis. Not to mention, you've always got that one armchair doctor who's decided that your medical issues don't matter and that weight loss is exclusively a battle of wills. You know the type. Depression isn't real, just choose to be happy. Those guys. For the record, hormonal and chemical changes in a person's body are real, and if they didn't affect how our minds and bodies behaved, then we wouldn't have them to begin with. There is a reason your body produces cortisol when you're stressed. There is a reason dopamine is released into your blood when your body needs to incentivize you to do something. An imbalance in hormones is inherently going to cause issues within the body, which sometimes does include weight issues. So anyone who entirely writes them off is someone whose medical opinion is one that you can write off in equal measure. And if you are one of those people, you're ignorant as all get out, and you are doing more harm than good. Maybe open a of book once in a while. Since you can't be sure that every person is overweight simply by virtue of their own laziness or unhealthy eating habits, a lot of what these arguments serve to do is make those who struggle with their weight because of medical issues feel guilt over it. A person who can't get their weight under control no matter how much they diet because of a medical condition is not going to be super pleased to hear about how their mere existence serves as an inconvenience to everyone around them. That's just cruel. Although it also shouldn't go without saying that those who are just choosing to not address their unhealthy dietary habits do sometimes falsely claim that it's because of a medical condition. It's not everyone, but let's not pretend that people lying about their medical history doesn't happen. It most certainly does. However, with regards to Tess Holiday, yeah, remember that's what this video was about, and her role within the fat acceptance movement, things appear to be a little different. Part of Holiday's activism details that people should be able to eat as much of whatever foods that they want without experiencing social discrimination as a result. Inherently, this is hinging on the idea that the fat acceptance and reasons for being overweight that she is justifying are based on dietary choices and not for medical reasons, essentially advocating for indulgent pleasure without consequence. And in the instances where there would otherwise be consequence, society as a whole needs to make changes to prevent that from being the case. As with many things in life, the issue isn't so cut and dry, as a lot of her activism does focus on how people shouldn't feel pressured to live up to unreasonable, or in some cases, blatantly unachievable standards of beauty. It's not exactly fair to expect regular working class people to live up to the standards of photoshopped magazines when the models themselves don't even meet them. Not everybody can afford a personal trainer, a dietary specialist, and an entirely grass-fed, no preservatives diet. In fact, it may have potentially been her status as a model that could have endeared people to her message, since she likely did have the funds to try and keep up with these standards like her peers in the industry, and yet despite this, she put across the notion that she was choosing to accept herself for who she was and what she looked like. It's definitely a mix of we should be allowed to eat what we want, and we shouldn't be socially ostracized based on your bias. Which, gonna be real, that's a little bit contradictory there. It can't really be argued that people's perception of you is going to be affected by how you present yourself and their own personal tastes. Plus, you know, consequences for your choices are a thing. I should also specify, because it may affect my perception, that I tend to struggle on the opposite end of the spectrum. I am a short person, and I struggle with my appetite as it relates to my medical issues, so I have difficulty keeping my weight above a certain threshold. While that same condition does typically cause weight gain, that happens to be a symptom I've weirdly avoided, so I'm a bit of an odd one in that regard. Maybe that will be a consideration in the future, but presently I simply don't have the same sort of experiences to draw from, so there may be a lot of factors here that I'm not considering. Of course, I am open to those who want to offer a different perspective in the comment section. Despite that, while I won't argue that a lot of these societal expectations are stupid, I'm not sure that teaching people to feel entitled to a lack of consequence for something you are detailing is a choice is the best option. People are entitled enough in the modern day as is. If you choose to indulge in food in excess, there are consequences to that choice that you would have to deal with, whether socially or physically. Some of it might even stem from people who do struggle with their own weight, have to keep to a very stringent diet, and are thus jealous of those who are able or willing to be more liberal with what they choose to consume. Jealousy is a powerful motivator for some people, and if a person is jealous of you because of what you're able to eat, they're probably gonna mock or shame you for it because it's something they can't engage in. It could also stem from someone who's being pressured to maintain a certain body type, maybe from a manipulative parent, a partner, or the pressures of their job, and so they're jealous of those who aren't subjected to the same pressures. It could literally be that they want to be in your shoes, but they can't, so they shame you for occupying a position that is not available to them. Granted, if someone's got a medical issue that pushes them up to 300 pounds to such an extent that they can barely they function either in daily life or whilst traveling, I think that's a whole other problem to address. And I'm not gonna deny that this would be a legitimate problem. Like, punk and goth subcultures are enough to indicate that you will sometimes need to accept that people's opinions of you are going to be affected by how you present yourself and how you look, as well as, you know, other ways that you could present yourself.
Except Jane's not here, you sissy little bitch!
If you want to argue that those aren't a good comparison because they're essentially costumes that a person can take off, fine. We'll go with tattoos instead, something that Tess should be aware of given that she sports plenty of tattoos herself. If your entire body, or even just parts of your body, are decked out in tattoos, people are gonna look at you differently. That's just a fact. Some of it's the result of cultural differences, like if you go to Japan, you might not be able to enter some communal baths or hot springs if you have tattoos, and some of it may be the result of people not finding you attractive. I don't think we can really deny that pretty privilege is a thing. Some people are gonna be nicer to you if they want to get in your pants. That's just a fact. There are even some cultural and societal adages that detail that what you're like as a person determines what you look like on the outside. So terrible people will manifest that externally, and so those who are pretty must therefore be good people. Obviously, anyone who's met a pretty person who manipulates others through their good looks knows that to not be the case. Some people may have personal religious aversions to tattoos, some people may consider them inappropriate or signs that you are dangerous. Some people may have medical reasons that prevent them from getting tattoos and may be jealous of those who can for that reason. I was in that camp for a while, and then I went to Northern Ink Exposure and got my first 2 tattoos on the same day. Weight bias is also not the only sort of social preference that exists. It's just a very prominent one for women. You can definitely make the case that racial bias exists with regards to beauty standards, hair and eye color preferences. I'll tell you right now that short guys can probably tell you another one, and they'll do so very passionately. Hell, if we're talking about body type biases specifically in terms of romantic partners, some people might like a little bit of maneuverability in the bedroom, flexibility perhaps, stamina, the need for less rope. Some people prefer to climb their partner, some people prefer to pick them up, though obviously that's not everybody. Some people definitely favor a little cushion for the push-in. I don't know what I'm talking about. I'm a tentacle monster. I don't get laid. Of course, the obvious counter to this is that if the beauty industry was more inclusive of various body types and standards for beauty, then society as a whole would be more accepting of larger bodies, which is true. We even have a historical precedent for how this works. You can find a fair bit of Renaissance art that depicts more full-bodied figures as being beautiful, because it was seen as a desirable body type at the time when people had less access to food. A fuller figure was essentially indicative of decadence and wealth. It was a sign that someone was well off and potentially had the resources to take care of not only themselves, but of you as well. Whereas nowadays, in a Western civilization where unhealthy fatty foods are the cheaper option and people are sometimes having to work 2 jobs to afford to live, those who go to the gym or keep up with a healthy diet are socially indicating that they have the time and funds to do so. They may also be passively indicating that, medically, they are not as impeded by the unhealthy foods that are so often advertised to us. In 20 or 30 years, someone who doesn't wear glasses may carry the social presumption that they don't spend as much time online or staring at their phone screens. And this is only in the West. Other cultures in other places of the world are going to have vastly different standards for beauty, and some of those will include fuller body types. You can 100% argue that it's not fair, especially in instances where a person has medical issues that make it difficult to live up to the standards of the era. I'm just saying that it is sort of a factor of how human beings, as a species, operate. We gravitate towards people who have visual indicators of desirability based on traits that are appealing at the time. Social, societal, and economic factors do play a part in that. Of course, nowadays, so does advertising, which is where the want for more representation in the media comes from. Also, the majority of us are ignorant to medical issues, whether they be physical or psychological. So what's the dealio then? What's the big issue with Tess now? Well, in fairness, I'm a couple months late on this, but at this point, nobody should be surprised. That's kinda just how I work. Either I want to wait a little while to see how people react to a situation or how it's going to play out in full, or ADHD brain went brr and I forgot. Sometimes both.
Diet is never a word I thought I would use when it came to my food. However, I've been eating an anti-inflammatory diet for the last couple months, and I can tell a vast improvement in my body and overall my physical health. And I wanted to share a little bit about what my breakfast looks like. It doesn't have to be scary. It can be delicious and fulfilling, no matter your size.
At the start of 2024, Tess started putting out videos showcasing some healthier options that she was preparing for breakfast, and directly stating that she was engaging in an anti-inflammatory diet. You would think that this would be seen as a good thing by those who had previously criticized her, right? She's seen the light, she's been convinced by our side, she won't be promoting an unhealthy mindset to her followers anymore. But no! Instead, while there were some creators who approached this from the stance of, well, this is happening now, as well as a few more productive ones who did discuss the issues faced with flipping things around on a community with that sort of perspective, there were others who were still criticizing her. Except now, it was from the perspective of, haha, now your community hates you, that's what you get for promoting that it's okay to be a fat fuck. I'm paraphrasing, but that was sort of the gist of it. It would be like if Andrew Tate just turned around one day and said that women were individuals and should be treated with respect as human beings, and that exploiting people for personal gain is wrong. And then his followers and the people who were criticizing his original viewpoint all started collectively calling him a beta cuck. If you build up a large enough community based on the exact opposite mentality, you're going to get some pushback. Very, you've made your bed, now lay in it, which is a fair perspective in plenty of instances, but not so much in scenarios where someone starts recognizing and trying to correct their mistakes. Like, when did people start thinking it was a good idea to criticize someone to hell and back, demanding change, only to then promote complacency and derision when they actually make that effort to change? Now, something I should point out, I saw a TikTok that, while not necessarily bringing up Tess specifically, did talk about this sort of behavior, and which I was a little confused about at first. I'll not show you the specific TikTok, just summarize. It was one of those what they say versus what they mean type videos, and so when alluding to influencers who were previously against diet culture, changing their minds and seeking to lose weight or better their physical health through weight loss, they act out a scene where that influencer details how they're being bullied for just losing weight. The what they mean portion of the video details that they are, in fact, being held accountable for the harm that they are causing this community.
I don't know who needs to hear this, but spring is coming.
Like I said, I was a tad confused by this because at first, I thought this was an argument in favor of those who would have criticized Holiday before she sought to lose weight. Sort of a you reap what you sow type thing, where Tess had built up this community following under the premise that you could be perfectly healthy at any size and that you should love yourself and accept your beauty no matter what the scale says. So were she to try and go against those principles, obviously she was going to get a lot of pushback. I thought this was an effort to acknowledge the detrimental position that she had put herself in by building up such a community. You can imagine my shock when I realized it was actually the side of the fat acceptance movement that she was doing harm to by choosing to lose weight. That people within the fat acceptance movement were choosing to hold someone accountable for doing harm to the community because they, as an individual, chose to go on a diet.
We are the Borg. Lower your shields and surrender your ships.
The hilarious part of this is that it exemplifies my argument even more. Holiday had built for herself an audience that would not have reacted positively to this change. People who saw anything that strayed from the narrative that made them feel comfortable, even if exclusively implemented on an individual basis, as an attack on all of them. If I can't be healthy, then you can't be healthy. If I can't lose weight, then you can't lose weight. Which is, definitely not a good mentality to have, Cthulhu end me now. If you have to have a gaggle of influencers making unhealthy choices and then justifying why those choices are okay in order for you to feel better about your own similar decisions, maybe that says something either about the choices themselves or you're lacking confidence within them. Like if I needed a slew of celebrities whom I had parasocial attachments to telling me that stealing candy from babies was okay in order to make me feel better about doing it, it's probably because I know on some level that I'm not making the best choices. And that is the real crux of it, that Tess had wedged herself between a rock and a hard place. Either she continue along as she'd been doing, promoting fat acceptance and failing to address any potential medical issues instigated or exacerbated by her weight, where she would retain community support, or she goes on a diet, loses weight, and in turn, loses the favor of the majority of the community that she's built. You might then argue, but it's okay, she'll lose the favor of one community and gain the favor of another, won't she? Specifically in reference to those who had been criticizing her before, now accepting her into their folds, right? Well, not exactly. Remember, one of the reasons I wanted to talk about this was because I saw a couple of videos talking about Tess's choice to lose weight, and I wasn't super impressed. Rest assured, there were people who were a tad more supportive, but others I really took issue with seemed far more content to just victory dance over Holiday in a haha we told you so type of fashion. They would acknowledge the issues she was facing and the backlash from her audience, only to say that she now deserved what she was getting because she'd been promoting such an unhealthy perspective for so long. And while I don't necessarily disagree that she is sort of facing the consequences of the mentality that she had been promoting for all of these years, and I did talk earlier about how you shouldn't teach people that they're entitled to not deal with the consequences of their actions, I also happen to think that there's a time and a place. That maybe making fun of Tess Holiday as soon as she's seeking to diet and facing that backlash is not the best move. Holiday is facing the consequences of the side that she propped up to view these sorts of decisions as evil or traitorous, but she shouldn't then also be dealing with it from the side that was prompting her to change in the first place. How is that supposed to be the consequence of her finally accepting the side of her critics? Those aren't the consequences of her actions, that's just some people being jackasses. If anything, it just showcases to me that these people in particular are not concerned with Holiday's own health or bettering the negative community that she's fostered. I'm not even entirely convinced that they care about the impact she's had on the medical or weight loss choices of others. It feels like they just wanted their stance regarding the fat acceptance movement to be proven right, and Tess going on a diet gives them the opportunity to laud her past mistakes over her head, allowing them to feel superiority by proxy because they knew then what she is only coming to realize now. Which is disappointing, to say the least. I get it to a degree, but again, time and place, and it'd be nice to think that people can be better. If the argument is that fat influencers are doing a disservice to their audience by promoting an unhealthy life model and making excuses so that people can justify their unhealthy living habits, then it should be a good thing when that influencer starts implementing a diet and promoting that as an option in their content. Then at least they are making efforts to correct the habits instilled in their community.
No one wants to think they've wasted their life following the wrong person. We just gotta find something big to change their minds.
But if you're choosing to ignore that in favor of making fun of her for not having always been of that mindset and relishing in the fact that the community, a group of people with those detrimental habits instilled into them, and not just by Tess Holiday.
I'm the Executive Creative Director, Chief Buyer, and Lifestyle Coordinator. Yeah, it's a huge responsibility. I'm very important. I decide the direction.
Are going to give her flack for it, that says a lot more about your own intentions and how little you care about that community. I thought it was bad for all of these people to be tricked into the mindset that they don't have to be concerned with their weight as it pertains to their physical health. Now it's funny so long as their ire is being directed against someone that you directly criticized for having those same habits? Isn't the issue then that this community is still of that negative mindset? Holiday's critics should want her community to be receptive of her message in this instance, not be reveling in their willingness to bully her for seeking help and promoting that self-improvement and choosing to diet is okay. The reality, and the first problem here, is that unless each of these community members individually had a moment of clarity and came to decide for themselves that they wanted to lose weight, it probably would be required that some of the influencers who were promoting this mentality to them change their stance. The secondary problem, however, is that Holiday is probably probably not the only fat acceptance activist that members of her community are following, so most of them are still getting this same narrative from others that diet culture is bad and that those who turn around and choose to lose weight are traitors to the cause. That video I cited earlier would probably be a good example of that, given that it did promote the notion that turning around and choosing to lose weight was doing harm to the community. For the record, I am not, in contrast, saying that diet culture is good. I think that dieting, if necessary, is a fine option to consider, especially if there's a medical incentive for it. I'm also aware that not all diets work for everyone, because of course they don't, when everyone's reasons for putting on weight and their bodies are different. I don't really think it's a good or bad thing in full. I think it's useful in some cases and 100% detrimental in excess, as with basically everything. If her audience members weren't following these other influencers, then Tess changing her stance would probably be a little easier for them to accept. Sure, not for all of them. I imagine that some people enjoy the excuse for their complacency that the movement provides, but at least some. The tertiary problem is that if a person trying to switch sides in an argument is rejected by the opponent, they are more likely to return to their status quo because at least then there is a guarantee of support. Rather than receiving criticism from both sides, why not just receive criticism from one? It's a little extreme of a comparison, but this sometimes happens when a person has been previously indoctrinated by fascist groups or cults. When they try to leave the fold, their original community turns against them, indicating an extreme lack of support for this change in mindset or values. If the communities they turn to for solace and comfort reject them, then they are, in turn, more likely to default back to that original fascist or cult community that they had previously left. A lot of the time when a person is brainwashed into a narrative like this, they're told that they will not be accepted should they try to be integrated into the other side, or that the other side is going to be way more strict or unfair. If they're proven right upon trying to leave, they will just return to their status quo because it provides that level of community and camaraderie that they are seeking and which they are already used to. Not to compare the fat acceptance movement to fascism, please don't get that misconstrued, it's just an example, but I worry about the prospect of that happening here, that Holiday might receive so little support from the side of her critics that she will default back into her old habits because it's a safer, more supportive alternative so long as she plays by their rules. If she's choosing to lose weight for a medical issue, the inflammation, then she might just go back to what she was doing before once that issue is sufficiently resolved. She might just yo-yo back and forth between 2 points depending on whether the same issue keeps popping up. In fairness, this concern is entirely predicated on videos I've seen related to this topic, both from the side of the fat acceptance movement and from its critics. I haven't seen what Holiday's comment sections are like. Maybe there are people who are far more supportive there. I also feel as though I would be doing a disservice by not mentioning that Holiday's fat activism does serve another, potentially more selfish purpose, that being it gives her job security. Yeah.
All that work and what did it get me?
Remember, Tess Holiday is a plus-size model. She is hired to model clothes for larger body types. The higher the demand for clothing in her size, the more jobs she gets. She's also one of very few plus-size models. Contrast this with the traditional modeling circuit, which is so competitive that people will whittle themselves down to an extremely unhealthy standard just to stand a chance. Inherently, Tess exists within a very niche group with less competition and which is predominantly limited by a company's willingness to advertise plus-size clothing options. If Tess can provide an incentive for them to do that, she's more likely to get jobs out of it. The fact of the matter is, the more fat women that exist, the higher the demand for models who fit that body type. By no means am I claiming that this is why Tess does what she does, but it is a factor to consider. Tess does not simply simply benefit socially by crafting the narrative that obesity should be accepted. She benefits financially by encouraging women to eat as much of whatever they want. She benefits by encouraging others to indulge in food to an unhealthy degree. This is one of the reasons I'm glad she's seeking to better her own health, and in particular, that she's trying to integrate this concept into her content and make the prospect of dieting seem less intimidating to her community. She 100% could have gone the route of a toxic liar and claimed that she incurred some medical issue that caused her to lose weight very rapidly and then just got lipo behind the scenes. The fact that she didn't is a good thing. The fact that she's choosing to reframe dietary options either in a positive light or as something that is a personal choice that is nobody else's business is a good thing. I could also see Tess continuing to get flack if people simply didn't believe that she was genuine, which I think that would be valid. Don't trust influencers, including me. I could have dead bodies in my backyard, you don't know. Don't dig up my garden. If someone felt that Tess Holiday was untrustworthy and either didn't believe that this change was genuine or else speculated that it was done with ulterior motives, I think I could understand their perspective. I could definitely understand their mistrust. However, I feel as though I might still take issue with it simply for the fact that even if a person did have ulterior motives in promoting a healthier lifestyle, they're still promoting a healthier lifestyle. Is this person donating to charity because they're a good person or because it's a tax write-off? Like, who cares? They still donated to charity. Fuck did you do today, you uppity busybody? Also, because I referenced Belle Gibson earlier, no, she doesn't count. Faking cancer to sell a health food cookbook so that you can claim that the healthy diet healed your cancer is a disgusting scam no matter how you look at it. You are not doing good by falsely giving hope to cancer patients lying about their prospects for being miraculously healed. You know, it's one thing if a person does something harmful for selfish reasons, it's another if someone is doing something positive for selfish reasons. At least in the latter case, the result is still a net positive. If Tess had some sort of financial or legal incentive to put across the idea that diets can be beneficial and that you shouldn't concern yourself with someone else's choice to lose weight, I still think that's a good thing. She's taking steps to fix the narrative that she helped to establish and prop up. She's encouraging her audience that they don't have to feel pressured to remain within the community or refuse to lose weight for fear of coming off as a traitor to those who can't or choose not to. And this is partially why I brought up Holiday's financial and career benefits in promoting health at every size, because she doesn't get that same benefit in dieting. She doesn't benefit in the same way by turning around and flipping the narrative on her audience. Of course, she benefits herself and her own physical health by dieting, but that's sort of a different argument. Now, I'm sure that there are other cases that you could make here. You could argue that she's only doing this to get eyes on her again. I'm not exactly sure how popular she is in the mainstream presently, so I can't say one way or another. I spend all of my time at the bottom of the ocean. What do you want from me? You could also argue that she hasn't actually changed her stance at all. That health at every size means health at every size, and that this viewpoint does not require Tess to be constantly gaining weight. If the point of the movement is to be accepting of people no matter their body type, and Holiday's medical issues are requiring that she lose a little bit of weight to deal with the inflammation, that should also then apply to whatever weight she ends up at. For all we know, Tess recognized an issue in the mindset forwarded by the community, because while there should be this expectation for health at every size, people were seemingly only ever granted that if they kept gaining weight. If you were to ever start losing weight, you incurred community ire, even though that shouldn't be the case.
Excuse the sound of sizzling sausage in the background, but I have to tell you something that is truly going to change your brain. We are well into January, and that means we are seeing people that are losing weight, doing weight loss things, moving their bodies, eating differently, and I want to tell you that none of that has anything to do with you. If that's something that you want to do, then I think it's wonderful. If it's something that you're not able to do, it's okay too. There's been so many plus size and fat creators losing weight and changing their bodies, and I know people are mad, but at the end of the day, people need to do what they feel is best with their bodies, and nobody owes anybody anything. And I know how it can feel like a slap in the face and you feel so betrayed, but guess what? The only person in charge of your happiness is you. And to be honest, that is a beautiful, liberating thing. Let me check the sausage though. Okay, so I'm done with breakfast. This is my breakfast. It's like Greek yogurt, chia seeds, flax seeds, pumpkin, blueberries, blackberries, all the good stuff, eggs, hash browns, tomatoes, anti-inflammatory things for me. So we're using Bowie's plates and bowls. I don't want to, whatever. And here's Bowie's. This is his breakfast: hash browns, boiled eggs, sausage, blackberries, strawberries. You know how to feed your body best. Nobody else. Listen to your body. Do what feels good for your body. Honor that. Don't pay attention to everybody else and the background noise. And just remember that everybody else is fighting a battle that you know nothing about. And it's a lot easier to judge people than it is just to heal yourself. Sending you love.
This is probably especially the case for the influencers they look to for guidance and reassurance in their choices. Cthulhu forbid they start losing weight, they're the faces of the community, and that would make them all look bad. Hint hint, that video I mentioned. Now, granted, it could just be because Tess evoked the dreaded diet word and that the community holds no issues with a person's weight just fluctuating on its own, but then I question, 1, what is the range through which that fluctuation is acceptable, and at what point would the community begin to speculate that a person may in fact be dieting behind the scenes? And 2, why is it any of their fucking business? If we're not supposed to concern ourselves with someone else's weight, why should we concern ourselves if an influencer chooses to lose a few pounds? I thought we weren't supposed to be concerned with another person's weight. If it's supposed to be health at any size, or we should be allowed to eat how much and whatever we want, but those who are thinner or those who choose to eat healthier alternatives are vilified, well, that's not really the case, now is it? It's health at every size, provided you're the size we deem acceptable. You can eat how much you want as long as it's a large enough portion. You can eat whatever you want, but not what are seen as dietary foods. That's not the freedom to eat whatever you want or to be whatever size makes you feel beautiful. That's the freedom to gain weight. Now that I'm thinking about it, I also question how much of this is specifically supported or enforced by the comments, because you know, much like how videos of young kids doing what could be read as suggestive things on the internet are going to attract the dregs of society, I wonder how many of these commenters might just be fetishizing these plus-size influencers.
I don't know who needs to hear this, but you're not just a big girl with a pretty face. You also have nice jugs.
If anything, I would argue that the community may be verging on equally restrictive and toxic beauty standards as those they were initially trying to combat, just on the other end of the spectrum. Think about that video I mentioned earlier where someone choosing to diet is framed as them doing harm to the community, and that the bullying that they face as a result of it is just them being held accountable for that harm. Where they are so concerned with one person choosing to alter their physical appearance, potentially for medical reasons, that they see it as an active threat. So concerned with how someone looks or chooses to present themselves physically when it's none of their business. Tell me, what exactly is the difference between the unfairness of expecting someone to fit into unreasonable beauty standards when they potentially have a medical diagnosis that makes this further impossible, versus expecting someone to stay within an uncomfortable and unhealthy weight range when they have a medical incentive to diet? Some of the same medical conditions that can cause weight gain can also cause weight loss, because a lot of them primarily have to do with hormonal changes in the body. What if one of these influencers started losing an excessive amount of weight against their wishes because of medical problems? Would the community hate them for it because they're unable to keep up with the body standards? Would they have to reveal their medical diagnosis to people online in order to stop the backlash, even though we went over earlier that nobody should feel entitled to your medical diagnoses? Wasn't that the whole issue with the toxic traditional beauty standards, and something that the fat acceptance movement sought to call out? That an individual's personal body choices were none of your fucking business, yet losing weight for yourself is an attack on others in the community? Hell, if I didn't know better, I'd assume that it was just a bunch of really self-conscious people who feel personally slighted when someone else does something that they can't, so rather than be happy for that person for setting out to achieve a goal, they have to self-victimize and shame them for ever even trying. If Tess started recognizing this mentality being at play, maybe this was her way of countering it. If it's health at any size, eyes and nobody should be concerned with what she chooses to eat, that should also apply if she's 30 or 100 pounds lighter. That's the point. Perhaps her values haven't actually changed at all, and she's just trying to open the community's eyes to how hypocritical this stance is becoming. Granted, that is purely speculation on my part. Maybe it is just as simple as she needed to diet for medical reasons and had to reframe diets as no one else's business so her audience wouldn't crucify her for it. Occam's razor and all that. That'd be like, I mentioned comic book artists at the beginning of this, didn't I? Okay, that'd be like if Scotty Young started illegally selling another artist's work on Redbubble with the excuse on Twitter that it's to make an example of the service. Look up Scotty Young versus Redbubble, I promise it makes sense. I also have seen a few more recent videos from Holiday that are maybe worth noting because they do pertain to people who were once a part of the fat acceptance community losing weight and later turning on that community.
This is about people that build entire platforms with the help of plus-size people, of marginalized groups, and then when they change their bodies, it appears that a lot of people have also completely forgotten that just because they are now skinnier, smaller, whatever, that fat person is still them, that those two people are the same person, because then they go and shit on the community that helped them garner their success. It's the same comments. It has nothing to do with someone losing weight. And if anyone was in the body positive, body neutrality, whatever space, you guys would actually know that. And that's what I'm speaking about, and that's what I'm tired about. And it's not just me. There are a ton of people that have been speaking about this and will continue to. And it's a cycle that I have seen happen over and over the last decade plus. But this is actually the worst that I have seen it since I've been in the industry. So no one here is anti-weight loss. We don't need to look in the mirror and face our delusions, because guess what? We probably, fat people, probably do that more than a lot of people I know, because we have to face those things every single day that we are reminded that no one wants to be us, look like us, be anywhere near the proximity of fatness, because I don't know if you knew, it's contagious. So be careful, don't go around any fat people, you might get it. I have always said that I believe that everyone should do what they want with their body. That's the entire reason I created F Your Beauty Standards. Because F it, do what you want, portray yourself how you want, but don't shit on the people that helped you get to where you're at. You can change your mind, that's fine. You can change your lifestyle, you can do whatever, but just don't shit on people while they're doing it. That's all we're asking. That's it. Kiss my thought out.
And while I understand where she's coming from, and I think she has a point in some regards about how turning on a community that helped you to thrive is sort of a shitty thing to do, I think in most cases it also heavily depends on why they have now turned against that community. Maybe this is just Holiday's means of informing her viewers that even if she loses a bit of weight, she's not going anywhere. But if someone else feels that their standards, their health goals, or their morals no longer align with the community that they were once a part of, I do not support the idea of forcing a person to continue to associate with a community that they feel as though they no longer fit in with. The whole shitting on them thing is finicky because I can't really be sure what kind of stuff we're talking about here. Is it as extreme as a person turning around and saying that everybody within the community is following a cult? That they're lazy sheeple who just try to find excuses to continue to eat to excess? Or could it be as mild as them pointing out that they felt pressured to keep the pounds on, or that the community did not end up serving a benefit to their health, whether that be physical or mental? Hell, for all we know, that video I mentioned earlier, again, was right. What if someone within the community chose to lose weight, something that, based on the doctrines of health at every size, should be completely within their right, and the community turned on them? Like, the video that I mentioned literally sets a precedent for that having happened before. And people who have been forcibly ejected from a community like that, even when what they were doing should have been okay, might be a little bitter about that. I could totally understand a person having gone through that, then speaking negatively about the community that rejected them. Even then, speaking frankly, if people are the same without the weight as they were with the weight, and so as soon as they accrue a modicum of social privilege, they ditch the community that helped to support them, why would you want someone like that in your community? Like, if anything, aren't they just showing that whether fat or skinny, they're an opportunistic flake? That they only maintained a station within the community because it benefited and validated them, but they were either willing to completely flip once given the opportunity or had always been secretly thinking negative thoughts about the community? Shouldn't you be glad when someone like that shows their true colors? Or again, is it a matter of them pointing out actual negatives within the community and how being within that fold negatively affected them in turn? I mean, the things that Holiday cites in this video are very specific. That the community is anti-weight loss and that they need to face their delusions. Like, is it just me? I did bring that up. That from a cursory glance, it does potentially paint a worrying picture that the community grants the freedom to gain and maintain weight, but not to lose it. So am I to believe that people who have left the community are also sharing this opinion? People who have actually been in the community for much longer than me, simply glancing in out of curiosity? Because now that does make me a little more skeptical about Holiday's intentions with putting out that anti-inflammatory breakfast video. Was she just priming her audience to remind them that her losing weight for the sake of her health was none of their business because on some conscious or unconscious level, she recognizes that mentality as an issue? It's also a little interesting that she cites the community as the people who got these hypothetical influencers to where they are at, but where it pertains specifically to following and not potential weight goals. Like, she doesn't outright say it, but there's that implication that she's talking about their following and online reach. I have to admit, I've never been super fond of that perspective, that your audience is the reason that you got to where you are. Because I think that discounts the work that the individual themselves puts in to get to that point. The audience may be supportive, yes, and I say may because that does entirely depend on the audience, but the reason each audience member followed is because something about the influencer piqued their interest. Something about how the influencer presented themselves, or their content, or their ideals, or their goals in life spoke to their audience members and made them want to join that person on their journey. The way I see it, the audience does not get you to where you are. That is you. And I really don't like it when people discount how important that is. In this context specifically, it feels like a red flag because, again, if the person who lost the weight is the same person as when they had the weight, then the skills and charisma they used to build their audience are still a factor. If their original audience no longer wants to follow them as a result of their changes, they can still build a new one, can they not? Unless the audience only followed them because of where they were weight-wise. I don't know, it's one of those... It feels very, we built you and we can destroy you. And in fairness, it's probably not that malicious. It's probably more, we built you and you're nothing without us. Which actually is not much better. That could be like a really uncharitable read on my end, but something about that is getting the brain nerves tingling with worry. Hopefully I'm wrong. What's your opinion on Tess Holiday? Generally, or in her efforts to lose weight for her own health? Did you have an opinion before? Has your opinion changed? You know, my opinion of Tess may have shifted a little bit in the course of making this video, just from looking at a little more of her content. Like, I want to give people the benefit of the doubt. I want to applaud people when they make the changes to be better, but if my worries are correct and Tess is embroiled in a community that is so adverse to weight loss, that makes me worry that she's only cautiously navigating around issues that she's already aware of rather than confronting them head on, which I get. I don't really care who you are. Confrontation with an audience on that scale can be a terrifying prospect, especially if appeasing that community serves your daily bread and butter. It's one of those rock and a hard place situations where I worry for her and I hope that she's making the right decisions for herself and for her audience. But based on what I'm seeing, I'm not super confident about it. And that is coming from a place of concern. So at the end of the day, what's the best approach here? Well, if the point of the fat acceptance movement is health at any size and that nobody else's choices with regards to their body are any of your business, maybe people shouldn't be super concerned with Holiday choosing to diet, whether that be for medical reasons or otherwise. Equally, if the whole point of criticizing Holiday was because she was promoting an unhealthy lifestyle, maybe change your stance a bit when she turns around and tries explaining that diets are not, in fact, evil. You want to view her as a hypocrite? Sure, I guess that's fine. Changing your stance would not actually be hypocritical, but it's whatever. Is this even relevant anymore? This happened like 3 months ago. Does anyone even care at this point? Remember that it's probably best not to fully trust influencers, especially if they financially or socially benefit from whatever they're peddling. Literally, the amount of times that influencer sponsorships have been outed as scams should indicate to you that random fucks on the internet are not necessarily concerned with questioning if what they're promoting is good for their audience. Much as that sucks, I know. Throw enough money at a person's face and their morals get a wee bit flimsy. Understand that equal randos online are not healthcare or nutritional specialists, and a high enough subscriber count does not suddenly give them the ability to dish out broad advice that will work for everyone. Your body is unique to you, and sometimes advice that works for one person is not going to work for someone else. While losing weight might not help one person, it could definitely help others. Someone might find it easier to lose weight by going to the gym, while others might want to take up dancing or just portion their meals throughout the day so that they're consuming smaller amounts spread out across a wider time frame. If the advice they're giving is just be happy with who you are, don't feel pressured to meet an unreasonable standard, then of course that's fine. Self-love is important no matter what size you're at. But if that advice is detailing to you that it's okay to indulge to an unhealthy degree, that's probably where you'll want to be a little skeptical of what they're selling. Anything in excess is going to be bad for you, whether that be food, alcohol, or I don't know, hell, vitamins. Water poisoning is even a thing. You can literally die from having too much water. A person who tells you that indulging in excess is totally fine either has ulterior motives in doing so, or they're ignorant and delusional. Be wary of that. You know, too much skepticism impedes your ability to trust, but a healthy dose of it can keep you safe. Also, maybe if you're listening to a creator criticize someone and demand change only for them to make fun of that person later on when they try, start listening to what they're saying a little more closely. Chances are they're betraying a lot more about their own intentions than you may realize. And finally, if someone you know is making an effort to better themselves, whether that be going on a diet, going back to school, getting off an addictive substance, or overcoming bad behaviors, for as long as you choose to be in their lives, support them on that journey. Tell them that you're proud of them for taking on what must feel like a daunting task. Positive affirmation can go a long way in helping someone to achieve their goals. We all want to think that someone believes in us, especially when it's hard to believe in ourselves. It's so easy to hide behind a computer screen and make fun of others. It doesn't take any thought, any consideration, or any empathy. Spewing out whatever you think might be hurtful in the moment, sometimes things that would specifically be harmful if they were directed back at us. It's easier to hurt than it is to think, reason, and understand. Just like it's easy to choose to ignore your bad behaviors. It's easy to not think about how the bad habits you're promoting affects your audience. It's easy to assume that everything bad a person does is because they're evil and that they're incapable of fixing their mistakes, just as it's easy to assume that they don't want to. Change is difficult, but it's also worth it, and we should be proud of the people who make that effort. Alright, someone gag me, I'm getting preachy. That's a good bit to end on. So it's been like forever since I did an Empty Thoughts video. Sorta hilarious given that they were supposed to be some easy content that I could just pepper in and around other things, but hey, what are you gonna do? ADHD brain went burr again, I guess. That being said, I hope you guys enjoyed this little discussion of one as a bit of a moose-bouche so that you can just listen while you work on other things. I apologize that it happened to be about a potentially triggering subject, but that's what I had in the tank for this time. Like I said before, with regards to weight issues, I tend to struggle on the opposite side of the spectrum, so it's 100% possible that I missed out on some very key details, and if that's the case, then I encourage you guys to fill in those blanks for me in the comment section below. I tend to put those little comment hearts on the ones that I feel offer an important perspective to consider. While you're doing that, why don't we take a gander at some of the ways that my viewers have indulged in bettering themselves through artistic growth? In the form of a fan art feature! Psych! Okay, so yes, normally I would put a fan art feature here, and I don't want you guys to think that I'm not grateful for the amazing fan art that you create. But I wanted to take a step aside to talk about something I think needs to be addressed. In this, I am mostly speaking directly to other content creators, but this is probably also worth hearing for viewers as well. Some of you may know that I've spoken in recent videos about the ongoing conflicts in Gaza, Sudan, and the Democratic Republic of Congo. Something that was pointed out to me in a few comments, and which I have started to notice in more recent content that I've consumed, is that, you know, there's a bit of a gap in the amount of people talking about it. You know, maybe that's just the circles I peruse. I've also seen a couple situations where a creator's viewer base has specifically brought it up and been shut down in the moment by said creator for one reason or another, and in some instances, I understand this. There is a time and a place, and sometimes if you're already in the midst of talking about something, you don't want to veer off topic. However, I've also seen some creators defend their stance in this regard by saying that they don't want to engage in political discourse on their channel, which I can, generally speaking, understand, but also that they don't want to pick a side. I don't agree with this. I can understand it, but I can't agree with it here. The fact of the matter is, with regards to cases of genocide and war crimes being inflicted against one group of people who can barely fight back, whose means of communication are being limited, whose food and medicine is being intercepted before it can reach them, by not speaking up, you are taking a side, whether you realize it or not. Because only one side benefits from silence. Only one side benefits from people plugging their ears and choosing not to talk about the atrocities being committed. And some people may argue that it's too stressful, it's too depressing, it's too terrifying of a concept to explore, knowing that such horrible things can be happening. I agree with that. However, if it's so hard for you to just hear about what's going on, how hard must it be for those actually going through it? For those who have family embroiled in the conflict? Would you really opt out of doing the bare minimum in spreading the word and resources to combat institutional propaganda because having to do so makes you uncomfortable? Would you knowingly turn a blind eye to people losing their lives and limbs for the sake of your own short-term comfort? Seriously, what is the point of a platform if not to do good? Thankfully, it seems like the wider public is recognizing the issue now, choosing to boycott not only companies but celebrities and people with incredible resources who are opting to stay silent. I don't know if that's also been applied to online creators, and at this point, I don't care. Frankly, we need to pick up the slack. If you're a creator and you haven't yet spoken on these situations or tried to inform your viewer base, I encourage you to break your silence. If you're a viewer, I encourage you to frame this to the creators that you watch. Inform them about who their silence actually benefits. Even if we're lucky and all of these conflicts dry up and are resolved in the next few weeks, there will be more. And if we can break people out of their complacency now, then it'll make speaking up in the future a lot easier. Please think on that. I am begging you. With all of that having been said, I'm going to leave some resource links in the description that I encourage you guys to read over and spread around. Please help in any way that you can. Thank you for listening, and I hope that you all have a good rest of your week. I'll see you later. Hooray! I have no idea what this video is going to be called. I wrote it up in like 2 days. Fight me! Also, I have fingernails now. This is the weirdest experience. I don't think I've had fingernails since I was 5 years old. That probably says something. Maybe 8 years old. I'm not sure. Oh well. Tess is a social media influencer, a makeup artist, and a plus-size model based out of Los Angeles. Los Angeles? What is a plus-size model, some of you may be asking? Well, it's sort of exactly what's advertised on the Why am I just inserting random letters that don't exist? While I can't... My tongue's fuzzy. Oftentimes, someone withholding the medical reason for their weight could be seen as them making up excuses for their own bad habits. Excuse me, fuck. Since you can't be sure. Oh my god, fucking. Why do I keep breathing out every single time? Oh, I want to fucking stab my tongue Stab it. Begone, vile beast. It's not everyone. Oh, for fuck's sake, I can hear the train again. Which is true. And there goes the fucking train again! What is that, 3 in this one recording? End me. Apparently the eclipse got everybody moving fast. That was today, by the way. I missed it, I slept. I'm a sleepy bitch. I'm gonna go downstairs when I'm done and make some tea. Some delicious roasted milk tea. Ugh. Once you go roasted milk tea, you'll never go back. That's not true. I had some peach tea yesterday. It was quite good. Which is... Oh, fuck, I hear another train coming! You know, normally this wouldn't be an issue, but I have to, like, amplify my vocal crap to such a degree that, like, I know the train's gonna be mildly picking up in the background, and it's gonna bug me if I don't cut it out. In fairness, it would probably also be, you know, drowned out by the music, but I don't want to take the fucking risk. And I can hear more trains. What is with the trains today? Just fucking end me. How could this happen to me? The trains won't shut up. Well, not... I hear more trains! What the actual fuck is going on tonight? Oh yeah, this is a loud one. Was this an express? Fuck off. I can hear another fucking train. It's literally like one every couple minutes right now. What the fuck is happening? The last one was literally a minute ago. Like, what are they testing the rails? Understand that equal randos online are not healthcare or nutritional specialists. Specialists? What the fuck was that word? Specialists.